Ben David, District Attorney, New Hanover and Pender County. Peter Michael Frank has been arrested for 6 counts of indecent liberties with a minor, 6 counts of indecent liberties with a student. He has just been given a $750,000 secured bond, and more charges are contemplated. I will say that this came to the attention of law enforcement when a woman who is now over the age of 30 reached out to one of my employees. They were classmates at the time in Roland Grise some 16 years ago when this young woman was a student, and so was my employee. She related to my employee that inappropriate contact had happened with Mr. Frank. That spawned an investigation by the New Hanover County Sheriff's Office, and that led to not only substantiating those claims by this young woman, but also a much bigger investigation that's led to the discovery of 5 additional victims, at least one who's currently on the campus of Roland Grise, and several others who have since gone on to be promoted into high school and are in school now at Harvard. I'll say this, we frequently tell our children that if they see something, they should say something. I go to every middle school and every high school every year in this district, including to Roland Grise back in December, and I've been doing that for as long as those young women were in school, and now they're not young anymore, and neither am I. What I will say is that we as adults need to model that behavior too. We have a responsibility to our young people, that if we see something, we should say something. I'm now talking to fellow teachers, I'm talking to administrators, I'm talking to parents, I'm talking to coaches, people who are in the custodial staff and lunch counters. If they see something, they should say something also. There is no statute of limitations on a felony in North Carolina, and there is nothing we won't do to investigate these old claims. And so I applaud the courage of this woman who's come forward, not just for herself, but maybe for others also. And isn't that the point? That we not only have to think about the individuals when we're handling criminal prosecutions and arrests, but also the community that we are all a part of. And so on behalf of this community that I represent, I want to thank her for that courage and for the young women who have already come forward. There may be others listening and watching right now who believe they might have relevant information either to these pending cases or that they believe they might be victims themselves or might know someone who is. They should be calling the New Hanover County Sheriff's Office, who is the lead investigative agency on this case, at 910-798-4260, so that we can look into those claims as well or gather any additional witnesses. Now, because my employee was the reporting party and the person who first brought this to the attention of law enforcement, my office obviously has a conflict of interest in continuing to prosecute a claim where we might be called as witnesses. For that reason, I reached out to the Special Prosecution Section of the Attorney General's office, the very same one that's already looking into claims that the SBI is investigating regarding the failure to report allegations that were spawned out of the Michael Kelly prosecution that my office handled in the Nicholas Oates case that was also originally prosecuted by my office before his untimely passing late last year. So I want to stress again that this is an active investigation as well as pending cases, so there's very little I can say. But I want to again implore the community to be the adults that our children deserve and expect, and to report crime as they see it. And whether that happened to you as a child and you're now coming forward like this young woman has done, or whether you're a parent who is concerned and wants to talk to your kid tonight, or if you're a young person who believes that you're being touched inappropriately or otherwise being subjected to unsafe behavior, we will protect you if you come forward, and you need to do that. That is what I have to say this afternoon, and I thank you for your attention. With that, I'll answer any questions, obviously respecting Ethics Rules 3.6 and 3.8 that prohibit me from talking about the facts of a pending criminal prosecution.
I have a question just based on the culture that seems to be surrounding New Hanover County schools right now. You know, this is a 3rd staff member in a year and a half being accused of things. And like you said, urging people to come forward, and we're hearing a lot. I spoke to a woman today who was not a victim but kind of knew what was going on in this case, and she said people know and people went forward, and it's not, you know, police or anything, but that a lot of people, a lot of parents, even older students feel like New Hanover County Schools has created a culture where even if you do come forward, it doesn't matter, nothing is going to be done, things have been swept under the rug. What is your office doing to kind of combat that?
Well, first of all, I'll say that we have a very close working relationship with so many of the schools. For the last 15 years I've been the elected district attorney, I've made it my business to have an adult conversation with kids before they have a right to remain silent because they're charged, but also to encourage them to be great witnesses, and if they're victims, to come forward and report that victimization. And I've been doing that for as long as any kid has been alive on the campus of Roland Grise. As to the concerns expressed that there is a deeper issue with respect to failure to report, that's exactly why the sheriff and I joined to call for an SBI investigation last fall, or last summer I should say, as well as having the Attorney General's office prosecute any cases that might spin off of those very critical cases that we were handling involving those two other matters. Michael Kelly, of course, has been placed into prison for decades based upon his conduct, and Nicholas Oates was going to be joining him had he not perished. Because this case is pending, I can't say what is going to happen to Mr. Frank except to say these are very serious charges, and we expect other more serious charges to follow today's arrest. As for their concerns, that's precisely what we called for that investigation, and we'll stop at nothing to make sure that the truth emerges. And because it's pending, I can't say much beyond that. But I will say that in addition to the wonderful school resource officers we have and WPD members who are at many of these schools, parents make the best police. And we just encourage you to come forward. I know that they have now established a Title IX compliance officer within the New Hanover County schools. And I say that to the people I represent in Pender County also. We've had instances, unfortunately, involving those teachers. I say frequently after officer-involved uses of force case that despite the fact that there's not always perfect conduct by imperfect people, and they're called human beings, that the vast majority of officers are dedicated public servants who do wonderful work on behalf of this community, and they're deserving of our respect. I'd say the exact same thing about teachers. Obviously, this is a calling for many people, and they're not paid enough, and they do wonderful work by our children. And so please take nothing away from the comments I have today that this is somehow reflecting on any of them. Quite the contrary. If it's anything like the cases I've seen involving officers through the years, no one cares more about making sure that the credibility of their profession is restored and upheld than people who are directly impacted as their peers. And so that's why I'm imploring the teachers and others who work on these campuses to make sure that we drum this out of their ranks, because our children certainly deserve better, and we have a job to do down at this courthouse, and that requires witnesses.
When the report was brought to your office's attention in mid-January, was that the first complaint your office had heard of Mr. Frank?
Yes.
And that was January of 2019?
No. That was
January
actually,
2020.
To get the timeline as I understand it, my employee spoke to a former classmate of hers sometime over the Christmas break. She brought that to the attention of an investigator within my office in either late December or early January, and they immediately reported it. My understanding is that investigation's been going on for the last couple of weeks to bring us to this point. Of course, that's the first report we've had of it. That's something that I always tell people in my office, integrity starts with us, and we want to make sure that we are doing everything we're asking the community to do also, which is if they believe that there is criminal conduct afoot, that we turn that over to the professionals who are investigators, because we're not, and that those allegations are looked into. It's exactly what happened in this case, and I'm very proud of the way that my employees handled that situation. It was brought to my attention late last week, and at that point, it was in the context of getting permission from me to have my employees interviewed by the sheriff's office, which of course I immediately granted. And then yesterday I was contacted to hear that Mr. Frank was going to be placed under arrest. It was at that point I reached out to the Attorney General's office, and they of course immediately agreed that this would be appropriate, not only given the conflict that we have, but because they also have these underlying investigations that the sheriff and I have already called for, involving the larger issue of failure to report and whether any of those claims would be substantiated.